We are here to talk about the catbird seat.
Yeah.
In the booth, calling Major League Baseball games.
As Red Barber dubbed it, the catbird seat.
Exactly. And few have done it as well as you, have been as honored as you, have been as literate as you, calling this great game of baseball. So we want to talk about your career as a play-by-play broadcaster. And if I can, I use the analogy of another guy who's at the top of his craft, Sandy Koufax. Before the '66 season, Sandy Koufax knew that was going to be his last year playing Major League Baseball. He actually told Phil Collier, San Diego writer.
He kept the secret.
He kept it a secret. Literally kept the story in his desk drawer until after the season was over. So Sandy spent that year going around the league, smelling the flowers, if you will, knowing he wasn't going to pass that way again as a player. Did you have a Sandy Koufax moment before this year? When did it occur to you that this might be your last year calling baseball?
Not might. I knew for more than a year that this would be the end of it. You and I discussed it about a year and a half ago, and I felt that I couldn't consistently reach my past standard. There might have been individual games or stretches within games or moments in games that were just the same as if it was the 1990s or the early 21st century, but I couldn't string enough of them together, and I have too much regard for the game, for the craft, and for whatever my own standard has been to hit beneath my lifetime batting average, which is why I'm grateful to the MLB network for replaying the sounds of baseball, because players have this advantage over people in almost any other profession. My guy, Mickey Mantle, hit well below his lifetime average his last few years. But even a kid who never saw him play can go to Baseball Reference and see what the career was like. And I just felt like in the last couple of years, I couldn't quite reach that. And what I hoped for this year, the people I worked for knew it, and a few other people knew it. I just hope to end on a grace note.
Well, no doubt about that. I mean, greatness is the mark of your career going back to the beginning. Can we talk about the beginning, the very beginning, calling baseball? 1980.
Yep.
You're 28 years old.
And looked like I was 14.
You get to call a Yankees-Tigers game, a good game. Tigers won 7-6. Did you know at that moment, Bob, that you were in the perfect place for you? That's where you belonged.
Yes. Yes. For all the things that I've been lucky enough to do, and I've appreciated all of them, the Olympics, the NBA, other things, baseball was always closest to my heart. And what I'm about to say in response to your question may seem corny. In the mid-1980s, I'm doing the Game of the Week with Tony Kubek, who I owe so much to. And Tony said, on Fridays, we're at Wrigley Field, so it was always an afternoon game then, there weren't any lights, sit behind the plate with the scouts. You'll get a lot of stuff from the scouts, who mattered more than pre-analytics. And there was a beloved legendary scout named Huey Alexander, who had lost his left hand in a farm accident or an oil rig accident of some kind, which derailed his promising baseball career. And I'm sitting behind the plate with him, and we're talking. And at one point he says, "Damn, Bobby, you're a baseball man." That meant everything to me. When I was a little kid listening to games on the car radio so I could track my dad's bets and pulling in Ernie Harwell from Detroit and Bob Prince from Pittsburgh and Harry Carey and Jack Buck from St. Louis, I dreamed of in some way being involved in baseball. And to have been involved as long as I have, and to have the appreciation that I had within the game for most of that time, I didn't want to diminish that. So it's time not to stop the other stuff, but it's time to stop calling the games.
You mentioned Tony Kubek.
Yeah.
You've had great partners over the years.
Yes.
I think probably you're most identified with Tony. You complemented one another so well. Your humor kind of elevated Tony. Tony's knowledge of the game elevated your calls. And it was a real big break for you starting out on the backup games. Michael Weissman hired you at NBC to do the backup games with Tony. I think he didn't understand at the time you had only done 4 baseball games in your life, 2 were in the minor leagues, and there you are off and running doing national Saturday games with Tony Kubek.
I learned on the job, but having Tony at my side was really important. And then after that, in the 90s, Bob Uecker and Joe Morgan. And then when I landed at the Baseball Network from the start in 2009, Jim Cott and John Smoltz and yourself and Ron Darling, last broadcast with him on TBS, Mark DeRosa for a few games, Dan Plesac. Grateful to all of them, but Kubek was probably the most important for me.
Let's talk about the Sandberg game.
Yeah.
Wrigley Field. That was the first game that WGN did not broadcast at Wrigley Field since, I think, 1948, because NBC then had exclusive rights. You were doing the backup game, but the main game was rained out.
Yep.
So now you and Tony have the complete national audience on NBC. And young fans today don't understand how big of a game Saturday Game of the Week was on NBC. And you wound up with an all-time game making all-time great calls.
Well, the players used to call it the game of the world. They'd see me and Tony or Vin and Joe at the batting cage. We're the game of the world today. And there were some Saturday afternoon games that got higher ratings than some World Series games have gotten in this past year. Not Yankees-Dodgers, but some. So that's how big it was. And it turns out to be the signature game of a Hall of Fame career.
Let's listen in.
Tito Landrum playing Sandberg very deep in left field. Into left center field and deep. This is a tie ball game. 1-1 pitch. Sandberg, in the Cubs' last at-bat, has twice delivered a game-tying home run, a solo shot of the ninth, a two-run blast with 2 out of the 10th. There may be a new player of the game.
I love that, Bob, because, you know, it's like a great singer. You always need to leave some place to go to for the biggest moments.
Yeah.
But you didn't oversell it. I hear the excitement in your voice, but it's still about Sandberg more than it is about you.
Yeah, and it's television. You know, I've never been someone who's going to go to the very highest octave on a sacrifice fly in the 4th inning. There may be some people out there who now prefer that. That's never been my approach. You got to save something for the biggest moments, and that was one of the biggest ones. And something else occurs to me here. Jack Buck was just down the hallway with Mike Shannon because they were doing the Cardinal games on the radio. And Jack is one of the greatest of the great. You make a top 5 of all time, and Jack Buck is there. And toward the end of his life and career, he was getting older and he had Parkinson's. And he used to get laughs around St. Louis by saying, I gave the Cardinals the best years of my life, and now I'm going to give them the worst. And you could do that as a local announcer because they'll allow for that. You're beloved. You're their guy. I think for a national announcer, it's a different calculus.
And, of course, the biggest stage is the World Series.
Yeah.
Your first World Series, if I remember correctly, you were working the pregame show. This is 1982.
Yes, Cardinals-Brewers.
Right. What do you remember about that? And for you, as a kid growing up, I'm sure you watched and listened to all World Series games, that now you are actually working the World Series first time.
I had so much nervousness. Oh, my gosh, there I am. Whoa. I was so nervous, and the thing that helped me was it was in St. Louis, so I knew the Cardinals, and they were very welcoming to me. And the first 2 games were in St. Louis, so that helped a bit. And there were fans behind the Cardinal dugout, and I was standing on the first baseline to do the pregame show. And there's no teleprompter, ad-libbing all of it, which only increased the jitters. And someone said to me after the thing was over, and I put the microphone down, and I'm walking toward the dugout, and I was going to go through the dugout to get back upstairs. And I saw a guy that I knew. He wasn't involved in broadcasting. Hey, Bob, have you gotten the jitter dance behind you? Because apparently I was like jitterbugging all around. But when the light came on, I guess I was okay. And the other thing I remember about that game is that Vin Scully was doing it on CBS Radio. And Vin comes walking past me, and I said, excuse me, Mr. Scully, my name is Bob Costas. It's a pleasure to meet you. And he said, oh, Bob, I know who you are. You've done very well, and I'm sure there are greater things ahead. Well, at that point, I'm thinking, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, I've lived a full life. Vin Scully thinks I'm okay.
Well, let's go ahead 6 years now to '88 World Series, showing off your repertorial chops in the Dodgers dugout. Of course, the Kirk Gibson game, game number 1. And you have an interview with Kirk Gibson after the game. Let's listen in.
I guarantee you this, the parking lot at Chavez Ravine is empty. Nobody has left their seats, and now the man of the hour is back out on the field. Kirk Gibson, have you ever had a feeling like this?
Well, it's hard to match, I'll say that, and you know, it's I guess a storybook. I was very disappointed today because I knew I couldn't play. I knew I'd be a detriment, and I got an injection today, and I was very sore, but I saw the opportunity. I knew we could get a guy on base. The pitcher was coming up, and I figured if I got out there and the fans started cheering, that I could suck it up for 1 AB, and maybe something good would happen, and it happened.
You talk about all-star teams. The other sideline reporter was Marv Albert.
Right.
And in the booth, Vin Scully and Bob Uecker.
No, Garagiola.
Joe Garagiola,
Yeah.
right. That is an all-star team.
And on the Gibson home run, you have two of the greatest calls in baseball history. Scully on television and Buck on the radio. I don't believe what I just saw. There was a lot of broadcasting royalty there for sure.
And Tommy Lasorda gives you credit for motivating the troops.
Yeah. You know, Tommy would do anything, A, to get a laugh, and B, to, as you said, motivate the troops. And that's the only at-bat Gibson had in the whole series. And then shortly after that, Mike Marshall was sidelined too. So the Dodgers put a lineup out there that looked like a B squad in a spring training game. Their whole lineup had fewer home runs than McGuire and Canseco individually. So I said something to the effect of, Dodger pitching aside, and their pitching is excellent. And remember, they were up 2-1 at this point in the series. It was Game 4. And Hershiser was going to go the next day. So no one thought that they didn't have a shot. But I said this has to be one of the weakest lineups ever to take the field for a World Series game. True then, true now. Lasorda's in the visitors' clubhouse. He hears it. He sees it. See that guy? Even effing Costas doesn't think we have an effing chance. And Marv is interviewing Lasorda because he made so many moves in the game. Squeeze play, gave Mike Davis the hit sign on 3-0, and he homered. All kinds of maneuvers designed to make up for the talent deficit. So we name him the player of the game, and he says, this award should go to Bob Costas. So then I walk over, and he looks over and he goes, yeah, we'll call you again when we need you. It was all a joke, but it wasn't a joke to Tony La Russa, because now his favorite team is down 3-1. So before Game 5, I got to go up to La Russa and explain that it wasn't a setup. I wasn't in cahoots with Tommy. It's just who Tommy is. La Russa understood.
And well, it wasn't long before you were calling the World Series games yourself, doing play-by-play. I wanted to ask you about 1999 because
Yes.
I thought the clinching game was kind of you at your best, because before the game you had written and voiced an essay, I think, about Roger Clemens and the moment that was had for the Yankees. Writing an essay like that, beautifully written, delivered perfectly, and then calling the game. And I thought putting the exact right cap on the end game here for the Yankees. Let's listen in.
A pop into shallow left. The New York Yankees, world champions, team of the decade, most successful franchise of the century.
Well, that's hitting the right notes.
That's a good closing caption, yes. But sometimes being a perfectionist will cost you sleep. That wasn't shallow left, it was medium left. Still bothers me.
Perfectionist as always.
The thing that resonates at the end is I'm okay with that.
I've always thought, Bob, that it's like great art needs a curator. You go to a museum, you need the right lighting, you need the right frame around it. It's the same thing for me with a baseball game. Someone like you, to put the right frame around the moment, is what adds to the beauty of the moment. Is that what you saw your job as a play-by-play person? Not to overcome the game, but to enhance the game.
Yeah, that was the idea. Once you get the nuts and bolts down, then you can add some of the little grace notes, if that's the right way to put it, and the proper captions, especially in the biggest moments. You want to write a good caption beneath the picture. You know, I mentioned this in my Hall of Fame speech a couple of years ago, well, 6 years ago now. Kirk Gibson still says, and every time I've crossed paths with him, he says this, I remember that moment, that pinch hit home run off Dennis Eckersley, half because of the way it felt when I did it, and half because of Vin Scully's call and Jack Buck's call. So when a broadcaster can rise to the occasion, it not only shapes how it feels in the moment, it shapes how it resonates down the corridors of time.